pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, November 20th, 2017. The wait is over. Tomorrow night, the Eastern Conference Final is finally upon us. And to talk about Columbus Crew, Toronto FC, Rudi Schuller of the Sporting News. Rudi, how you doing today?
I'm not too bad. How are you guys?
Good. Rudi, I'm a little nervous. Is it right to be nervous about this? Could TFC's dream season be ending?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the cliche of why they play the games, right? And Columbus has been a good team over the past over the final half of the season and into the playoffs. So, yeah, it's definitely a matchup that I think a lot of people should be concerned about.
One theory I've seen is that this might actually, despite the hot finish that Columbus had, and I think it should be noted that most of those wins came against teams that weren't in the playoffs. So maybe that takes a little away from that. But Columbus might actually be a good matchup tactically to TFC. They're a little less goony, shall we say, than the teams that have caused TFC problems, including the Red Bulls, including the Impact last year in the playoffs. How do you assess the tactical matchup?
Well, no, I agree. They're definitely not going to try to ugly up the game that we saw the way the Red Bulls did, earlier this month. They're not that kind of team. They're very similar to TFC in that they like to possess the ball. They have a very fluid attack with 3 or 4 guys up top that really know how to move the ball around and move between the lines and make the defense work, which is exactly what you could say for TFC, of course, too. So it's going to be interesting. Of course, the first leg we won't see 2 of TFC's best players, but I think that TFC is going to play a little bit more pragmatically in the first leg anyway. They won't have to put up with the thug tactics that we saw against the Red Bulls. So it's one of those things where I just don't think it's going to be a similar kind of series to what we saw against the Red Bulls. It's going to be something a little bit more resembling soccer than an all-out street brawl.
You mentioned the absence of Giovinco and Altidore for the first leg of this home and away series in the Eastern Conference Finals. How important is it tactically for Columbus to find a way to suffocate the service to a Vasquez or suffocate a Vasquez, because he becomes the key, right? If Altidore and Giovinco are not there.
Well, I would argue that he's the key regardless, because he's the guy who unlocks the defenses for those guys, right? He's kind of the catalyst regardless of whether those 2 are not there. Yeah, he doesn't score as many goals as them, and he can't make something from nothing the way that those 2 guys can. He's a little bit more of a traditional midfielder that needs a little bit more to be more involved in the play, I would say, than Altidore or Giovinco. Those 2 guys, they can kind of disappear for 60, 70 minutes and then kill teams with 2 touches of the ball. Where I think that Vasquez, he thrives on being involved in as much of the play as possible, and that also drives the team. So, I think as we kind of touched off upon it, it's very similar to what the Columbus Crew have with Higuain. And Vasquez himself actually said that at practice the other day. He said that he sees Higuain as a very similar player to himself. And what TFC was saying is that they want to starve service to Higuain so that he can't provide service to Kamara and Santos and Miram. It's going to be the same here, especially with Giovinco and Altidore out. Those are guys that can create by themselves out of nothing. Of course, Giovinco can hit a free kick from anywhere, and Altidore can bully the back line the way he so often does. Without those 2 guys there, you're probably going to see Tosaint Ricketts come in, and he's a guy who relies a lot more on service. He's not a guy who's going to dribble past anyone. He's not a guy who's going to create a moment of brilliance. That's what Vasquez is for. He's the guy who's going to be opening up channels for Ricketts to run into. So if they can deny him the space, that's what they're going to do. It's going to come down to guys like Will Trapp on the Crew and their other defensive midfielders that will likely be shadowing both him and Bradley, because I believe that Vasquez and Bradley are going to be looking to spring Ricketts at every opportunity because they're going to be playing a lot more compact at the back than they usually do without their 2 big guns up top, and especially because they're on the road. So I think TFC could be playing a little bit more compact at the back, and they're going to be looking to break that counterattack anyway, which is a little different than what they play. So that means denying service from both Vasquez and Bradley. That, like I said, that comes down to guys like Will Trapp and maybe even the center backs that can kind of push up and kind of get in their faces a little bit. So it's a very interesting tactical matchup because I think these two teams do match up and down the board a lot better than a lot of other teams in the league.
This season and in the playoffs so far, Rudy, we've talked about the Altidore, the Giovincos, the Bradley, and the Vasquez. One player that, in my mind, have been not necessarily overlooked, but that his sudden rise to a starting position in the starting 11 has been maybe not talked about enough. Alex Bono as a goalkeeper. It took Duane a long time to get used to him. But Alex Bono is in the top voting for goalkeeper of the year. Is in the top 5 with, yes, only 2% because a lot of goalkeepers got a lot, but he's in there. How impressive has Alex Bono been for you in the playoffs and in the regular season, saving a few goals and definitely a lot of chances for Toronto FC?
Well, I mean, you just have to look at the way he started last year. You know, he was the backup to Clint Irwin last year. Everyone knew that Irwin was going to be the guy. He was the guy that was brought in with all the playoff experience and the guy who was going to lead the line. And that's mostly what Clint Irwin was last year. And when Alex Bono came in, he was very shaky in his very first appearance last year, let in a bit of a howler of a goal in his first start. And then from there, he had a lot of critics, and I was one of them. I didn't think he was ready for the big time, and I still didn't think he was ready at that point. But luckily for TFC, they were able to kind of bring him in alongside Irwin and let those two guys push each other. And now we see what we see this year is that Irwin's been surpassed by Bono, and I think that's completely on merit. Bono has grown into a keeper this year that's been very dominating inside his own area. Whereas before he wasn't, he was always a good shot stopper, and he's always been, a formidable physical presence. He's a big guy, but now he's using that physical presence to kind of dominate his area. He makes himself big when it's a one-on-one situation, but then his positioning has grown in leaps and bounds, and I think that's where he was kind of lacking. And of course, that has to do with experience. That's what he was lacking last year. His positioning has grown, so he from where he starts to make saves, he's in a starting spot, which is a lot better to make a save rather than having to make a miracle save and sometimes make howlers. He's cut down on that because his starting position is a lot better. He's a guy who has a very high ceiling. I don't know exactly how high his ceiling is. I've heard other people talk about he could be another Luis Robles type, or someone along those lines where he's perennially in the top 5 goalkeepers in the league. I'm not ready to anoint him that yet, but he definitely has shown potential to be that. And he's definitely shown that, unfortunately for Clint Irwin, Irwin's kind of become spare parts to the cause now. And I don't think we're going to see Clint Irwin around next year just because Bono has become the main guy.
I was about to say Clint Irwin should probably start looking for real estate in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Rudy, that's you were training, as you said. Was anything sort of made of I guess you could call it a slump the TFC's had. Do they have any handle on what exactly has gone wrong over the past month, or do you have any theories on what's going on?
Well, my theory is that teams started really, really watching tape and kind of dissecting the few flaws that TFC has in this lineup, and there are very few, but there are some that are easily exploitable. And I think number one is the fact that the 3 center backs aren't very mobile except for Chris Mavinga. He's the guy who's kind of playing the emergency defender. When someone kind of messes up, he's always the guy that has to run down an attacker and make that last save. And to his credit, he's done that more often than not. He's been the guy who's kind of put out the fire, so to speak. Drew Moore, for all his experience, he's not the most mobile guy anymore. He's reaching his mid-30s now, and he's starting to slow down. It's natural. It happens to all of us. But with having 2 mobile guys next to him helps. Zavaleta is not quite as mobile as Mavinga. He's not as good, to be quite honest. To be frank, he's not. He's another guy who's grown in leaps and bounds, but I think that he was starting from a much lower level than, say, a Nick Haglund was. And that's the other guy, Nick Haglund. Is he going to start alongside those other 2 guys, or is it going to be Zavaleta? Regardless, the fact is that none of these guys are very comfortable on the ball. They tend to give it up to Michael Bradley very quickly, and that's where all the TFC attacks come from. So I think teams have noticed that if you can pressure them off the ball quickly and get them have to get them playing the ball a lot quicker than they're more comfortable with, they can give it up a little bit more. We saw that with the way the Impact played against them. We saw what the New York Red Bulls are trying to do. It's pressure that back three into giving up the ball in terrible spaces. And yeah, I think that's been the catalyst for, I wouldn't say a downturn, but it's definitely been a little bit of a slump that TFC's had since September. And to their credit, they're still winning more than they're losing. So that's I think that's just an overall talent level. But there's definitely a few flaws that can be exploited, and I think that's the biggest one is the fact that there's nobody really on that back line that is a ball playing center back. So if they give it the ball and they're not the most fleet of foot trio back there, then they can be exploited. And I think that's exactly what teams are trying to do right now.
I think teams are probably watching tape of that Montreal 5-3 win at BMO Field in September there. Certainly the mobility issues you speak of were front and center that day. I'm wondering, to that point, Rudy, whether you think that we might see a slightly different tactical approach to the first game in Columbus. I'm wondering whether they might go for at the back, they might go with the diamond or something in the midfield. How do you think tactically they'll approach it?
Well, I mean, technically they're going to have to make a shift just because the two big guns are not up top, right? So that leaves a massive hole up top, and it also allows Columbus to have a little bit of a freedom to push their center backs a little bit higher because they don't have to be worried about 31 goals in the regular season being on the field. So I think that is going to be kind of a catalyst for an entire shift. I do think they're going to go with the four at the back, at least for this first leg, just because it's an away leg, just because at that stadium, Columbus is very good. And because, there's going to be a total shift. We're probably going to see a 4-5-1 with Tosin Ricketts playing up top and Victor Vasquez playing just below him. I'm not sure who the four are going to be, other than obviously the two outside backs are going to be Morrow and Beitashour. But is that really obvious? Because Nico Hasler can also play there as well. Drew Moore will start regardless of what happens. And then who's going to be his partner? Is it going to be Mavinga? Is it going to be Zavaleta? Is it going to be Hagelin? I'm not sure. I think the only people that know are them and Greg Vanney right now. It's going to be interesting. It depends on what Greg Vanney wants beside Drew Moore. Does he want, the Mavinga, the all-around athlete next to him? Does he want a guy who can dominate in the air like Nick Hagelin does, or does he want a steady guy who's good at a lot of things but not great at anything the way that Eric Zavaleta is? I'm not sure. I would say it's probably Mavinga's job to lose to play alongside Drew Moore if they play a two-man center back pairing. But yeah, it's. I guess we'll only find out about an hour before the game because I think it's up in the air right now.
Let's talk about the other side of this Eastern Conference Finals for a second, Rudy. The crew. Hashtag save the crew. How important is that narrative heading in this Eastern Conference Finals? The Cinderella story, the underdog that might disappear and move to Austin, fighting for their supporters one last go at a cup. Is it something? Is it something that Toronto needs to be wary of?
Well, I think it's definitely something that the team is rallying around. Columbus is. I think any more motivation is something that TFC will be, wary of. This is a semifinal. This is a semifinal for MLS Cup. So I mean, the motivation is there regardless, right? Everybody wants to get to the MLS Cup final. Everybody wants to lift that trophy. That's not cliche to say that. But anything more that the team gets to rally around, I think that is that is something concerning for TFC. TFC has their own narrative. They're the best team ever in regular season. They're going for the first ever treble in MLS history, and they are the odds-on favorite. And they're if they win against Columbus, they're gonna go at home and they're gonna probably play against either Houston or Seattle. And there's so many narratives on TFC side already kind of driving them, so they want fewer narratives for the crew. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, I think, because there are so many crew fans on edge right now. They don't have a lot of fans, but they have a lot of, they have a lot of people that are kind of proud of their city. So I think that's kind of galvanizing the whole city. You see the mayor getting involved in it, and you're seeing political cartoons in the Columbus Dispatch, making Don Garber and Anthony Precourt out to be fat cats and all this stuff like that. That's galvanizing an entire city. That's not just kind of relying on the 13,000 hardcore fans that show up every game. Now the entire city has a stake in this, and I think that the team will feed off that as well. They're not going to want to lose what could possibly be their final playoff game at that stadium ever, depending on what happens next year. they're not going to want to go out that way. They're going to want to go out and put on a show against against a team that nobody expects them to really beat. So it's one of those things where I think it definitely can motivate them. And I think that Greg Berhalter will definitely use that. Any good coach will use any kind of scrap of motivation they can. And, having the big scalp of TFC in front of them, having the chance to go to MLS Cup, those are two things. This is another thing. I think it's just another motivating factor for a team that, is picking a lot of them up along the way.
Now, the tough question, Rudy. Mm-hmm. Does Columbus has what it takes to beat Toronto in a 2-match series?
I'd say yes. I wouldn't bet on it, but absolutely, they have what it takes. I'm not sure if they'll do it, though. Columbus has not won. I'm just looking at their schedule now over the whole year. Columbus has not won a road game since, what is it looking here? Since July 4th in Minnesota. So they've tied a lot, and during that, especially during that second half of the season, they tied a lot on the road, but they lost as well. They haven't won a single road game. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just looking at it here, and I think that's right. So that's something that's going to be in the back of their minds. They have to take advantage of this first leg. They see that Giovinco and Elter are out, so they know that TFC's offense is going to be without their two biggest weapons. So that's a check mark on their behalf. They know that this 90 minutes in Columbus basically is their season, because if they don't go into BMO Field, if they don't go into BMO Field with a big advantage, they're going to be facing Giovinco and Altidore. Excuse me. Can you pause for it?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so it is a tough situation when you're looking at a Columbus team and Toronto team that don't seem to be peaking at the right time. But yeah.
Yeah, that's right. My apologies on that.
No problem. As long as you're okay. You got me worried for a second, Rudy.
Yeah,
as long as you're
like I'm getting over.
Cool. As long as you're breathing, I'm happy.
yeah, I'm good.
Cool.
What I was trying to say is that Giovinco and Altidore are going to come back highly motivated at a BMO Field where TFC wins pretty much all the time, except for a couple of well-known examples. So Columbus knows that they have to win this 90 minutes. It's something that they have to do. It's something that they're highly motivated to do. And I think they're going to go out there all guns blazing.
All right. We don't want to kill your voice too much, but we can move it to the West for a second. Houston's obviously the surprise of the Final Four here. I think we all kind of expect. Well, I picked Seattle and Toronto to repeat for the MLS Cup, so we'll see how that goes. But talk a bit about Houston if you could, and why should we not ignore them in this Final Four conversation, Rudy?
Because they're extremely dangerous. They've got the best counterattack in the league. They've got Albert Ellis, Roma Kyoto, and they love to run they just love to run against teams. They can kill you in a half a second. It's just that's how quickly they are. They're going to be playing against a Seattle team that, they've done well. When we talk about the second half of the season, they are a second half of the season team. They were last year. They are this year again. I think they're a little bit better than they were last year as well, even though it may not show it in the standings. They are a little bit better than they are last year. And I think unfortunately for them, they are susceptible to a counterattack. They don't have the fleetest of defenders there. It's kind of like TFC. They have Chad Marshall and Roman Torres who are beasts and they're absolute wonderful defenders. But if you can get by them, they're not catching anybody. They're not going to catch an Albert Ellis who is basically a track star in a soccer uniform. So it's one of those things where I think that Houston will know that they will give up a lot of the ball. They will allow Seattle to have a lot of the ball, especially in Seattle, and they will look to counterattack. And teams like that, we know, we've seen over the past few years now, teams like that can do well in a playoff series just because the margins for error are so small. Houston's been doing it now for the past few weeks, and they're not going to be held scoreless against the Seattle Sounders. They're going to score at least once or twice. It all depends on how many Seattle can score in return. I think that Houston has a very good chance of winning this series. I do think that Seattle is the favorite. And I ultimately do agree with you that Seattle will probably make the MLS Cup. But Houston's going to give them a run for their money. And I don't mean that in any kind of pun. I just think that Houston, they are, just like the Crew, they are gathering momentum. but they are a lot more dangerous, I think, than the Crew are in the fact that they can score goals in an instant. And I think that's something that Seattle has to worry about.
All right, before we let you go and get a drink of water to rest that voice there, Rudy, quick prediction. When everything's settled here, what's that MLS final look like? Who is it? Who wins?
Well, I think I just said it. I believe that it's still going to be a rematch. I think it's going to be Toronto versus Seattle. I'm not ready to pick who's going to be the winner between those two yet. But ultimately, I think those two teams, those are the favorites. I think they're going through. All
right. Rudi Schuller from the Sporting News. Thanks again, Rudy. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Sorry for almost dying on air there. It was
it's all good.
Not my plan.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back, Duane. Soccer Today. It's Monday. Playoff restarts tomorrow. The final international break of the MLS season is over. So it was fun. I was happy to have the Premier League back this weekend too. How worried are you about Columbus tomorrow night?
I'm more worried about Toronto than I'm worried about Columbus, if that makes sense. I do.
Okay, so you're more worried that Toronto could be detrimental to its own self. Like the only way Toronto could lose if they beat themselves.
Yeah, pretty much. What Rudy hit it with I think it was his second answer there when he was talking about the weaknesses that the teams are seeing with TFC, and I think that if you go back into our archives, you would have heard us talk about similar things a month or so ago of how Toronto's weakness really is sort of speed at the back, and this is my concern is that Columbus with that big emotional crowd behind it, and I think it will be a sellout. There's going to be a lot of TFC fans there, but it's going to be predominantly yellow. Let's not kid ourselves. They're going to be motivated for that. And I look at that 5-3 game, and, it's a bit – that 5-3 game was even worse than it sounds because it was 5-1 at one point, right? And then I think Montreal sort of let off the gas a little bit, and it allowed Ricketts to get those 2 goals back. But I look at that game, and I look at what happened that game, and that's my concern. My concern is that TFC season ends in 30 minutes of madness, that they sort of get caught on the break a couple times and they start to chase the game maybe, and they don't have their big guns to pull goals out of their and maybe they lose with a hanger. Like I think if this series stays close, Kevin, I think TFC will have the ability to the experience and guys like Bradley that can sort of shut it down, and they have the high-end talent in that second leg to get a goal when they need one to win a close series. But I think the way Columbus wins it is that they hang 4 on TFC on the road or something like that, right? And I legitimately have a concern with that maybe the momentum will just start rolling. And, it's been a weird month or so for TFC. They're still very good. You can tell, but there's something not quite right now. And I don't know whether the break helped or hurt. And there's trepidation heading into this game for the first time all season.
Well, in the words of Greg Vanney, the players are tired of training. They want to play games. It's been a long time now. And the players that were not involved internationally, they're looking at this break and be like, just give me that final already. Give me that Eastern Conference final already. The one side of that equation, though, Duane, that really in the last few days got even more traction, the whole Save the Crew pre-court PSV, which is Pre-Court Sports Ventures versus Columbus, basically. And now there's another side to that story. In Austin, the last few months, there was big rumblings. I'm not even sure. There's been so many USL announcements. I'm not even sure which city said they were going to have one or not. It's in the 20s. But anyways, Austin was designated or touted to have a USL team in the very near future. And now with the whole Columbus might move to Austin, the talks are pretty much dead for the USL aspect of an Austin soccer team, just because now the fact that they might have an MLS team in the very near future, they won't need a USL team. So the Epstein group, the group led by Epstein for the USL, is totally in stop function. Basically, it's stopped dead in the tracks. This is right now until the Pre-Court and Columbus moving maybe to Austin is finalized. So it's that aspect of the Cinderella story of On the pitch, it's amazing. Off the pitch, there's an anger in the fan base that are galvanizing the players to play even harder, and it could be the perfect storm to kick TFC out of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Maybe, but yeah, no, I hear you, and I understand that narrative. Now, the question I have with that is, how much of that is real.
No,
it's just not a movie, right? Like, it isn't Major League as much as we want.
It's not, but there is something to say in the fact that the players themselves might feel like, you know what, we might even lose our job. You never know, because who wants to go to Austin? Maybe they don't. Maybe they're going to move on, and you feel maybe a few inches taller, a few pounds stronger.
There's no doubt they're going to be motivated, and there's no doubt that they want the fairy tale. Obviously, I think that narrative, I play that narrative too, and I think that narrative. So I'm not blaming anyone that does, but I think when I step back and sort of look at it from a more detached sort of view, you got to understand that TFC is also motivated, and they're also want to finish what they started last year, and they're highly motivated to make history, and they've met every hurdle, right? We're in a slump right now. TFC is. I used to use the royal we there, but TFC is in a slump right now. But this is still a team that has won the Canadian Championship, that has broken the points record, that has won the Supporters' Shield, and did ultimately advance over New York. So I think maybe you got to be careful too much in putting too much stock in this idea that good feelings and good motivations by Columbus are going to supersede what is a highly motivated and accomplished TFC team so far. And look, they don't want their season to end any more than Columbus wants theirs to end. So I think that really is a wash when you're talking about the motivational stuff, and the off the field stuff makes one hell of a narrative. And I'm glad that if TFC isn't in the MLS Cup final, that it will be Columbus hosting it. Not that I want to see that as a longtime TFC guy, but if it happens, and after the sadness ends and I turn on the game to watch it, I'll quite enjoy watching Columbus and the whole circus that will be around that, if that's the case. But it really is. It doesn't matter when talent's talent, right? And I think that equal motivation, and there are going to be equally motivated in an Eastern Conference final, it kind of wipes itself out, and it's really going to come down to which team performs. And but Columbus has the capability. I would give them a 20% chance to win this series, which is higher than I would have given any other team leading into a 2-game series with TFC up till now. 20%, that doesn't sound like much, but that's still 1 in 5, right?
Okay. Now, I said to Rudi earlier, the tough question to Rudi. Here's my tough question to you, because I know how you feel about this. 1 year ago to this day, we were not expecting the 2-game series that was just in front of us. That was maybe, up until this point, the best 2 games of soccer I've ever seen, back to back. Will this live up to the expectations of last year's Eastern Conference Finals? Can Columbus-Toronto live up to the excitement of Montreal-Toronto in 2016?
There is no way. It's no. I mean, even if it was 7-5 final, even if TFC won in extra time, again, it still wouldn't be that serious, because you can only have, there's only one first time, right? And look, the rivalry, the emotions, the passion, the fact that TFC fell behind 3-0, like, that is a special series that's going to live on for a long time. I think from a TFC fan perspective, as I said, this is the first time in a long time, maybe heading back to the MLS Cup last year, where TFC fans are legitimately on edge. They are going to be passionate about this game. They are up for this game. They want to see TFC succeed and end this, end the Toronto slump. It's been 24 years, 24 years since the
Blue Jays?
Toronto has won the Blue Jays in 93.
Didn't the Argos win since then? Yeah,
I
it doesn't count.
To caveat that, so allow me to finish. Since the TFC, Toronto has won a championship in a league larger than 10 teams in an American League. Okay, let's be honest. CFL,
yes.
The Argos advanced to the Grey Cup yesterday, but it still is going to be.
Weren't you there, Arthur?
Yeah, I was. I went to the Easter final yesterday.
I know.
It was colder. It was colder than MLS Cup. Oh my God, it was so cold in there.
Well, it might be colder than MLS Cup this year. Anyways, that's the other big question here is for Toronto, for Columbus, and on on the Western side as well. Like, it's going to be a cold MLS Cup regardless, because it's going to be in the East. So it's going to be either in Toronto, which, by the way, this is our weather forecast here for the winter. Our winter predictions here. Supposed to be a terrible winter. Supposed to be very active winter with precipitations and cold. So we might actually get an MLS Cup final in the snow and very cold.
Orange ball final.
Oh my God, I know a lot of people who would be excited and lose their mind over that.
I think that there's the danger if there's an orange ball final that we might that neutral finals might be ended.
They come back. Next year you have the final in Atlanta in a dome where there's no way weather will be a factor in.
I'm just looking at the long-term forecast here, but it's a weird. It's supposed to be +9 on Tuesday, so there you go, +9 Celsius for our American listeners. That's what the rest of the world uses, so just learn the metric system rather than me converting it for you. Was that condescending? I don't know. Anyway,
maybe, but it's fine.
Yeah, nine's mild for this time of year. Yeah, it's going to be a cold final, and that's going to affect the game a little bit. I think this series is going to be scrappy, to be honest with you, and I think TFC is going to win it, but I think it's going to be like, squeaky bum time at the end. I'm going to go with 2-1 is going to be the aggregate final, and it's going to be. I even could see Columbus winning the first leg 1-0, and I think TFC might actually be happy with a 1-0 loss in this first leg, although the momentum might be a factor there. Anything other than a multiple goal loss, I think, is going to be viewed as an ideal sort of situation for TFC. You don't want to lose. You'd like to win it because that's going to give you a great advantage heading into the second leg. But a draw, a 0-0 would be perfect. A 1-1 draw would be great, because then TFC would have the slight advantage. So anything like that to make it a little easier on them heading into that second leg. It's just a nerve-wracking time because it's been such a great season, and I think that people are going to say, I'll say this before it happens, if they lose this series, it's still a successful season. That's not an excuse. That's not making things up. Let's be realistic here. They won the Supporters' Shield. They broke the points record. This is a good season regardless of what happens over these 2 games. But it's going to be devastating to TFC fans. It's going to be hilarious to non-TFC fans who will view this as just a typical Toronto situation to get this far and to be this good and then to lose at the end. That's the nature of a playoff system. And I was saying this to a friend the other day, is that I can handle losing the final. I can. I think that if they make the final, I'm there again. It's going to suck on the day, but it's a 1-game playoff. Things can happen, right? Losing before the final, that's going to be a tough nut to swallow, and that's going to be really, really hard to come on this show the next day and put a happy face on it, because it won't be a happy day, and it'll be a pretty sad day, and you're going to have to wait another year. They're going to be good next year too. Yeah. But this seems like the perfect storm. I think Atlanta's going to be better next year. I think that a lot of teams like DC and that aren't going to be as bad. Well, you never know with DC, but
they can't really be as bad. Probability here. It's hashtag math.
Yeah, I would really like to see TFC win this championship so TFC fans can start focusing on the next thing, which will be the CCL. Only in a couple months after that. So that's something I've been in the back of my head excited about, but I can't be truly excited about it until they get through this playoff run, and they got to finish it at this point. They got it, and that's, I think, probably what's the narrative in that dressing room is, and the hope is that they're not nervous and saying that. It's that they're passionate. We've got to finish this, and saying it in that way so that they have the confidence to get it done. They are better than the Crew. They beat the Crew 5-1 earlier this year. They're better than them. They have to show it now, though.
To finish the show, Duane, yes, tomorrow we'll be back, and tomorrow Champions League is back, so we'll talk about the Champions League tomorrow. But to finish today, anything that caught your attention this weekend in the Premier League or elsewhere that you have to mention?
Arsenal, obviously. I mean, who knows what the hell is going on with them. That was a devastating loss for Spurs to lose not only to their rival, but then you look at City winning their game as well to continue their undefeated run.
Chelsea winning their game and coming back to title contention, at least the teams behind City contention.
Yeah, well, 8 points right now, so it's starting to look like last year's title race. And again, the only thing that is preventing me from calling it last year's title race is my own PTSD.
It's called superstition.
Yeah, no, City's looking. They're starting to hear that unspeakable thing get mentioned a little bit, whispered, and that would be to go a season without losing a game. But,
oh my God.
losing the league game. That's starting to get whispered in certain circles out there. I think let's get through the Derby first, which is the Derby's the day after MLS Cup final. But anyway,
so who knows? Depending on who wins the MLS Cup final, that Derby could be either very fun or quite tragic for you.
Dude, it'll either be the best weekend ever or the worst weekend ever. We'll see. Either
or maybe it's just going to be like a normal weekend. It'll be even down. Yeah. It's just like the high and the low, or the other way around, and it's even.
For the record, folks, I would sacrifice a Derby loss as much as it would suck to see Toronto win the MLS Cup at home. I would, because the one's a championship and the other's just a game that happens ultimately when you strip it away. It's 3 points, but I'd still rather win both. There you go.
That's true.
All right. On that note, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about the Champions League games. Chelsea is traveling to Azerbaijan for their first ever game in Baku. And we'll talk about this tomorrow and all the other games in the Champions League. And we'll continue to talk about the playoffs in MLS. We'll focus maybe a bit more tomorrow on Seattle and Houston. And until next time, as always, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.